We have now we're moving into the second speaker in this morning session, Overcoming Resistance. And I'm very pleased to introduce Helene Götschel, a visiting researcher at the Research Group of Gender and Science Studies in Physics. She is trained as a physicist with a focus on experimental particle physics, but has worked in various institutions, including the Institute for General and Vocational Pedagogy at the Technical University of Darmstadt, Germany, and was Professor of Gender and Diversity in Engineering and Computer Science, which would have been a challenge, at the University of Applied Sciences and Arts at Hanover in Germany. She's taught physics and interdisciplinary courses, but also is interested in the history of science, social history, higher education, and gender studies. So very much spanning a transdisciplinary research profile. So you're very, very welcome, Helene, and I'll hand you over to talk about negotiating narratives of diversity and equity in physics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helene, and also thank you very much for inviting me, Thomas, to the conference. It's such a pleasure to be here and to bring together all this disciplinary background that I have in my person, and because this is the places where we can empower each other to do the work in the areas we are standing in. So I have to see how close I have to come to see my own slides. What do I want to do? I want to first give you some theoretical background, mostly because I thought there would be a lot of people from the STEM area who might not so be familiar with that, but also to make clear my understanding of gender and diversity. And I will give you some empirical findings about norms and exclusions in the culture and representation of physics. And already yesterday we have heard some of these examples, so I just add some more. And then I will give you practical experience of implementing new narratives in the teaching of physics. And this goes back to my experience at Hanover University of Applied Science and Arts, where I was teaching gender in mechanical engineering mostly. Weird thing, I will talk about this. And I will end up with a short summary. So this conference is about gender, but as we heard yesterday, it's very important to think intersectional, so that focusing on women is not enough. There's some more categories we have to think about that, also very powerful to create social inequalities. And they all add, and they not only add, but maybe, for example, multiply. So, and some of these dimensions are the age of persons, the gender and gender identity, race, ethnicity, nationality, culture. Last night we discussed, like using the name race in Italy and Germany, it's very problematic, but in the US it's a standard category for people, so they might differ how we call this area in the different regions. The physical and mental disabilities and abilities of people, the religion and worldview, the sexual orientation, sometimes called LGBTQ, like being transgender or gender fluid, queer. Maybe it's not a sexual orientation, but it's more a gender identity, so I would put this more to gender and gender identity. And the social background, the class, the money we have when we are grown up, that gives us opportunities in a capitalistic world, or if it's missing, maybe we might miss the opportunities. And I have a simple explanation. I think the world is more complex, but my simple explanation is that you can understand diversity in different ways, and you can have a static or essentialistic understanding of diversity. As the physics community just now signed a diversity paper, and they have a very statistic or essentialistic understanding of diversity. So people or things differ in some or many categories or dimensions. they are different. The difference is essential. The difference is just there. We are different. We have to accept it and to deal with it and make the best out of it. So we have to be friendly to each other, although we are so different. And this can bring a lot of advantages. For example, gender marketing. You can sell products for men or women, maybe even for third gender people one day. So, and this is, I think it's too simplistic to understand the world like this, that there are differences and that they are fixed. I think they're not. And I have a more dynamic or deconstructive understanding of diversity. Deconstruction, post-structuralism, we heard yesterday of Karen Barat, we heard of Judith Butler. So this is the area I also would add to. And in this understanding, we would say that the categories of diversity, they are social cultural structures or concepts to order people or things. They're concepts which create and support power structure. So there's a lot of power relations in it to make these people different. We are entangled in power relations. We are not the good people outside of it, but we are part of this structure of power relations. And in these structures, we are made different. And because we are made different, then there's a legitimation why some people are more valued than others, depending on gender, depending on race, ethnicity, and so on. So it's something that is in the society and the culture, it's concepts, and we split people, or we put people in these boxes to explain why some are of higher value than others. So I would, in easy words, try to explain this dynamic understanding of diversity. Okay, that's the theoretical background, and we come to the empirical findings. When it's about power, then it's about norms and exclusion in the culture and in representation of physics. I mean, it's also in the people, but we have been talking a lot about people, and I think we can quite well imagine that norms, exclusions, discrimination is disturbing people, or is working on people. So I will not talk about this dimension. I will talk about the culture of physics. Also yesterday we have heard some papers about it, and the representation of physics. So to the culture, I will show you two research results, just to give you an example what I mean when I speak of the culture of physics, and analyze this from a diversity perspective. So in Germany, there has been the research project Gender Dynamics, Disciplinary Cultures and Research Organizations in Physics. And it was a joint research project from 3 Berlin universities. And it was an ethnographical study, like going there and looking at a strange culture. Ethnographic studies observing solid-state physics, chemical physics, particle physics, and biophysics research groups for universities, for research institutes, and for 2 research clusters, huge groups of researchers. And of course, there were different projects and different findings. And I show you the findings of Martina Erlemann, who was taking part in the research of the research groups outside universities. And she found that gender occurs when you watch these groups. Gender is observed in the culture of physics in 3 areas. So the first area, gender is explicit topic in conversations, mostly in the context of conversations and on gender equality actions. So just like we heard just a minute ago from Joanna, when it's about this GSI, then of course gender is a big topic. Everybody speaks about gender, then the noun gender is said, and it's mostly when it's about these GSI things. But gender is also a topic, or can be seen, can be studied, found in the social interactions that are going on in a research group in doing science as doing gender. Also, Anna mentioned these ideas yesterday. So observable in interactive settings, team meetings, informal chats, where gender differences are made relevant. And Martina gave an example that, like it was the story of going to a hairdresser, which is quite gendered. I don't know if you have this here at the conference. It was in an informal meeting that there's no time for going to the hairdresser to show. But at the same time, there's more stress on women to have proper hair than on men. And so this was a gendered topic in the social interactions at the physics group. And also, that may be the most interesting thing, gender can be found in the performance of the research practices, how people do their experiments, how they present their experiments, how they talk about their research. So in these performances of physics, you can see that the gender is performed, observable via metaphors members of the institute use for describing their activities. So for example, to show that it's very competitive, that it's at the edge of the universe, it's conquering, it's powerful, that's a narrative that's showing masculinity. And if you say this is groundbreaking, it's environmental friendly, it's serving the community, it's caretaking, then it's a more feminine way to discuss your research. So this is one study just to see gender is enacted in the research in groups in physics. And the second study I showed you is a study of two US American, I think they're in literature, Jatila van der Veen and Jenny Cook-Crumpets. And they published online, I think, a really nice paper, which never, I think, was officially published. But I found it really interesting. They had the idea, they went to physics conferences, and they studied how physicists behaved giving their talks about physics. Maybe you know that, let's say, not Donna Haraway, Sharon Trawick, also we heard the name yesterday, she was studying behaviors at conferences and seeing that in physics this is a very religious demonstration of, like, you always only see the back of the person and it looking into the light, everything is dark, and this is like in a ceremony in a church or temple. And these two persons, they were looking at the talks given by high-ranked physicists. So they, I give you an example of a former Nobel Prize winner who was invited to the conference and who was telling the story how the atomic bomb was developed in the Second World War in the Manhattan Project. So they really take this little story and analyze it line by line, and they find that this is really a structure of a fairy tale. Like this Nobel laureate said, there have been a few occasions, a few historical occasions, when there have been tremendous urge and threats. So the evil is recognized. The first one goes back to the Second World War, and it was the threat of Nazi Germany acquiring nuclear weapons. There's an imbalance in the world, and a restoration of balance is desired and needed. There was a relatively small number of scientists throughout the world who were able to really assess this to some extent. And one of them, namely Skillard, the hero, emerges in the story and is recognized for his qualities. So the hero mostly is like the supervisor of the person talking, or maybe the person himself. And the hero now goes on a journey. Skillard persuaded the most pacific man that one can imagine, namely Albert Einstein, so now we have the wizard appearing in the story, to write this famous letter to President Roosevelt, which authorized the establishment of the Manhattan Project. So now the wizard goes to the king, and the king is convinced that there is a project starting that the evil can be overcome. And then there's a battle. The person, the Nobel Prize winner, did not talk about this because everybody in the room knows that the battle is the World War II. And the hero emerges victorious. Again, this is understood as common knowledge, so there's not talked about it at the conference. And normally in the fairy tale, the hero takes a bride, in a sense, to the throne. And also, number 9, this has been intentionally omitted. So it's the absence of femininity in the whole story here. And the order is restored with the price of a loss of innocence. On the Manhattan Project was a theoretical physicist, namely Robert Oppenheimer. You don't need to be reminded the final outcome of it. It was enormously tragic. 200,000 people lost their lives in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So they give some examples how these stories are really structured like fairy tales. And the most interesting for us here from a gender studies perspective is that the women are not even there as the persons to need to be saved. So they're just absent. Sharon Trevick also analyzes books from famous people like Richard Burton and Feynman, and where they talk about how much they love physics, and she sees parallels that they actually compare physics or electrons, their research area, with women, and also like women, they have to be conquered, or they have their good sides and bad sides, and so. And also, she says that there are a lot of not only their love and passion for physics in the story, but also their concepts about women, about relationships with women, which is very only on a sexual level, but not on a level of a good colleague base. Okay, there are just 2 examples for the culture of physics. And now I come to 2 short examples for the representation of physics. Also, we heard this already yesterday. So you can look at scientific books. And I did bring you the book, which came out in 2013 as Revolutions in 20th Century Physics, originally in the US. And the small picture is the original cover of the book. I mean, it says revolution. The picture, it's mathematics, but the colors and how it is, you could also interpret this is some kind of conquering the universe. To me, it's some spatial picture. And the funny thing is that the larger picture is the German translation, which is totally different, because it's an introduction to 20th century physics, and it shows you who is really important, who made an impact on the physics of 20th century. And beside the guy in the first line, second from right, the name Hideki Yukawa, that's all male, Western, white people. So if you read this book and you're a black person or you're a girl, a student at school, I mean, is this inviting to become part of physics? So this is a really old-fashioned story, but this book is not from 1960, but it's from 2015. So these old stories are going on and are going on. My colleague, Martina Allemann, she was doing her PhD research on how physics and physicists are represented in the media. And there she found that when there's an article of a physicist doing his work, it's always described as spectacular, conquering the world, explaining complicated things to us, doing a lot of work. And so the male physicists, the physicists are portrayed as heroes in these stories. But when she looked at female physicists, like it's Jill Tarter, an astronomer, she analyzed this article, it was in 2000, and then it said like she's looking for the extraterrestrial life for more than 20 years, not successful. Her skin is very gray. She looks not happy. I mean, this is not an attractive way to show a physicist. And also, she's not as pretty as Jodie Foster in the movie Contact, who is dealing with this, who is based on the biography of this researcher. And then my students said, well, this is from 2000 or 1999. This is really old. I don't believe this is today. And so with my students, we were looking at newer things. So the course was in 2014. So we found this article, and it's presenting, although the name is difficult for me to say, Fortini Marco Polo Calamara. And this woman, she's raised in Greece. When she was around 40, she was in Germany working as a physicist, and then she moved on to Canada, and today she is no longer in physics, but in computer science. And so the portrait is, it's a successful physicist doing very complicated theoretical work. Normally the children write on the door glasses, but here the mom does. But look at the pictures without reading the article. From left to right, it's like this. It says it's very difficult to bring family work and research work together. This is the topic of the article. Or look how cute this girl was when she was very young and living in Greece. I mean, you would never find this comment or picture in a story of a male scientist or physicist. Or, of course, this is a mom with her child. Also, maybe it's not usual to show with physicists. And, well, this maybe you could find it's to be modern, to be not only in physics, but maybe also philosophy or art, to be a little bit special. But, so there's a lot of stereotypes in describing these stories, and they're written in a way that also these women, successful women in physics, are role models, but still these role models have somehow to take care of dilemmas. They're responsible for the family. Physics doesn't give enough time to take care of the family, and so on. So this is the representations of physicists in 21st century, at least in my country, Germany. I always say it's a very conservative country. It behaves like it is not, but believe me, I think it is. So, well, after giving you some more, to add some more to all the contributions yesterday about empirical findings, what is wrong with physics somehow, and I stress on the culture of physics and the representations of physics. I want to come to a more practical side and discuss how old stories are told, how old narratives are told in physics, and how we can use new narratives. And I'm specialized in teaching in the 5-year project at University of Applied Physics. I was teaching physics as well as gender studies classes. So there are narratives in teaching, and in education we call this the concept of the hidden curriculum. It's a term going back to the, I think, 1980s. And today I would say that a hidden curriculum, it's a message which is learned, also not openly talked, not spoken about, but just learned, and it can be and it is the transfer of norms, of values, and beliefs. And this can be in any field, but here it's, for example, in physics, the norm about identity, about cultures. We had this example yesterday as well, and I give you some right now. It's stories about gender. What is gender? Who is the proper male gender? How is masculinity? What is objectivity? Also, we talked about objectivity yesterday. What is the proper race? Ethnicity. So these three guys here on the corner, these are physicists, but maybe this is not your first association to have. The required intellectual brilliance you even need if you have a 1-year physics course and go into engineering. So physics always needs this brilliance. And other norms that shape narratives of physics and physicists, of masculinity, of white supremacy, about the conquest and domination of the nature. So all these messages can be hidden, or narratives can be hidden in the curriculum while teaching physics. So I was paid for 5 years by the Ministry of Education in Lower Saxony, which is one of the 16 parts of Germany, and had a Maria Göppert-Meyer professorship. So I was paid to do gender at this University of Applied Science. And I was angestellt, I was hired to do this job. But then I came to my colleagues in mechanical and engineering, and they said, no, Frau Götschel, we don't need that. We want you to teach physics. And I said, well, do you know that I qualified with a master's diploma in 1990, and now we have 2014, and in between I have not been teaching physics. That's no problem, you can manage. I said, well, okay, if you say this is okay, I tell you, I am paid by the minister for Lower Saxony to do gender studies. So if I teach physics, I will teach it in a different way, because I have to make sure that I teach gender in my classes. And they also said, no, this is no problem, just to teach physics, because they have a lack of teaching at the time, so they just found some money. And this also makes me very curious about people in physics who applying for gender money. So be careful what they really want to do and what you really want to give them. So, I was there in 3 departments, which also was weird, electric engineering, mechanical engineering, and computer science department. And for 5 years. And I was teaching gender and diversity classes. I had some projects where we did some classes were English classes, and the language should be English, and the only thing that I had to do was to talk about technology. So that this is a very good chance I can talk about technology and society, and of course this has to do with gender and diversity, so no problem. And also I was teaching different kinds of projects, like I asked the students from higher level to come to my first year students class and watch me and the students and give me a feedback about my teaching, to improve my teaching. Or with some of the students I was doing videos that could help the students from the first year to learn by themselves, things they need to fill up to be able to follow the class and things like that. So there was a lot of creativity in these projects. And besides, well, I had to teach physics in electricity and mechanical engineering, and so I started with the first year course. It's mechanical engineering, mechanical physics for students in engineering programs. And so the picture shows my students in the technology and society course. And while I was teaching, I was studying myself, teaching, and doing experiments in the teaching set. And so the method is called autoethnographic study. So like I'm an ethnographer, but not going looking for strange places, but trying to look at myself doing it because there was nobody else doing it. In addition, I had some comments from the students, from the evaluations, from the students from the higher classes, from the project, who give me feedback. For example, I was so concentrated on to teach physics in a good way that I didn't notice, and I heard this from my project students, that the students today, they can concentrate for 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes, it's really going down, and I have to do a change of method, to do something new, like show a video or draw something or act. So, and I didn't notice this before, but it was very helpful for me how they supported me. Okay, so I give you some examples what you can do when you teach physics. So what can be new narratives? Make the familiar strange. I mean, physics is telling a lot about the proper masculinity, and in physics textbooks, there are lectures mostly explained with male scientists, sportsmen, racing cars, weapons, machines. So I choose atypical sports. For example, my students who learn something about the conservation of momentum, they have to study look at a 4-minute film of a kind of gay masculinity they need to see with a figure skater, and so that their task is to look of it was the film where he did the first quadruple jumps in the world, and also Evgeny Pleshenko is making wonderful pirouettes. So they have to watch this and compare this to the rules they learn in physics, and it's so, I mean, if they do sports, they do football. So this is so confusing to them. They start to giggle, and they can hardly stand to watch this for 4 minutes. But I show them just another kind of masculinity without mentioning that. I just say concentrate on the spins. Or one of my colleagues, he's developed a lot of tasks with animals, which I like. But it's always tricky to do something new. In a task in kinematics, a lion is chasing after an antelope, and the students calculate if the antelope will escape or will be catched and eaten. So the task explains physics, but at the same time, I can use it to explain the thinking patterns of physics. So my students watch a 4-minute video how a group of lionesses is going after a zebra. I didn't see an antelope film. So, and then we discuss. In real life, it's natural movement patterns such as acceleration and braking, change in direction, the necessary teamwork of a pride hunting together to end up as a rectilinear and regular movement in the task of physics. But moreover, I don't even have to mention it. Mostly the students notice that there's the real life, and the story that they are told in physics is that it's a lonely male hero solving the task. So, and then when they notice, I said, well done, and be careful. You will not only today, but in many stories, be told the story of the lone hero, the active masculinity and passive and overlooked femininity in physics. You will find this old-fashioned stuff in the tasks. I quit this because of time reasons, just say contextualize the production of physical knowledge. It's not falling from the sky. There's a lot of society and negotiation in these stories, in these normalizations, in these sizes, norms like in the meter. And also when you do experiments, this is also very tricky, a tricky point, enact material discursive change. There is this demonstration of the conservation of the angular momentum. It's the same as with the figure skater turning around. If you spread out in the room, you turn slowly. And if you make yourself small, you turn very fast. So normally, my male elderly colleagues love these experiments because they can show they still are strong, they still are young and powerful. And also, like some of the students love to do these experiments. And I want to have everybody in the class the chance to feel this in their own body, like the embodiment with the virtual reality. Also in the experiment, you can have a bodily feeling of it. And then one female student said, yes, but could I do it, please, with one heavy weight only? And I said, well, good idea. Let's try if it's working. And she does it with one. And we can see it from outside, and she can feel it from inside. And I was so ashamed, I, who want to be gender fair, force a female, a person in a minority position in the class to say, I am weaker at the others. I would like to do this. Can you give me special conditions to be able to do this? I was so ashamed, so I said, well, from now on, I only use it with one, because you can feel it, you can see it. One is enough. We don't have to demonstrate powerful sportiveness and so on. But then I have the material is brought by technicians, so they always bring 2 heavy weights. Then I have to hide one behind the desk, because I have students who have to repeat the class, and they always look for the second heavy weight. They're already trained to show strength. So look carefully at the experiments you show. You're not only teaching physics, you teach a lot more messages about the culture, the masculinity, and so on. So the outcome of this all was I had positive feedbacks from most of the students, especially from students of minority groups. And they voiced it in course evaluations and in personal conversations with me, that they really enjoyed, or some said, if I would not be in your class, I would have quit my studies. But I had many negative colleagues, and they came from most of my negative comments from most of my colleagues in mechanical engineering and from the dean of the department. And their arguments were, this is just mad and loony. Don't do it. It's not normal. The students who need support are just not clever enough to become good engineers. A high dropout rate is a proof for a high quality training. And I mean, physics has an 80% dropout rate. So they think this is normal, this is how it should be. Some students are bad material. This literary side, they told me, these students are bad material. They need to be sorted out. Some say, we have successfully, German Maschinenbau is the best in the world, and we've taught in this way for 40 years, so why should we change anything? This is just a danger. And they not only said this to me, but also to the people who do higher education and try to support them to get to newer things. There's no need for change. Teaching with weapons, we have some experiments with weapons, is realistic. So I have to teach with weapons, and that's okay, while teaching with a stuffed penguin is not. This is kindergarten. I used to have, we just out of fun, we developed this idea to have a stuffed penguin. Sometimes it is doing experiments, sometimes just sitting there, sometimes being hugged by my assistant. So they hate this penguin. They didn't prolong my stay because they hate this penguin. And always when I was talking on gender conferences, the researcher said, please keep on with the penguin. And they say they hate it because it makes physics ridiculous and it has to be elite. So the penguin is destroying everything. And even in engineering, not in physics at a high-ranked university. And also they say, this is not scientific, and I have to concentrate on more. If I concentrate on more than the poor physical facts, I should stuck to the physical facts. So this is the resistance. And if I summarize what I said, I like the quote Anna gave in the website. Not surprisingly, physics does an extremely good job at keeping people out. I would maybe add not only physics, but physicists. So I love this. It says everything to me. And also, I want to say, change is possible and change is necessary. I think you will agree. I don't have to talk to you. Not only on the level of people in science and the professional culture, change can and should go deeper. It is time for new narratives, welcoming diversity in physics, research, and teaching. One story is like I have black students from Cameroon, And I mean, physics is so wide. So I hired an elder female black student to do some of the tasks, so to have a role model seeing her. And also I show sometimes some video clips from MIT who have a black teacher showing experiments. And I tell them, of course, look at this experiment we cannot do, we don't have the equipment. But the hidden curriculum is black people, of course, can do very good physics. So, and resistance might occur because it includes the loss of privileges and power, because being normal in the future will need an explanation. Nevertheless, to create and promote an environment that is welcoming and free of prejudice, it is essential to detect old narratives and to include new narratives in physics on all levels. And I highly want to encourage you to experiment more with new narratives in physics. Thank you very much.